throw out the two-state solution and give Israel all the legitimacy to keep on occupying the Palestinians. We think that we should learn from history and to prevent this thing from happening to other occupied nations around the world. And this is what we support inside government here. I'm going to analyze to you why we preserve the occupation for the long time and destroy the chances for peace, and why it's the most important thing in the debate. So let's start. We think that, first of all, when we're talking about not intervening and not cooperating with the occupying regime, we're talking about being passive towards them. What it means not giving them any information or intelligence about citizens or about crimes and things that happen inside our territories. It means to not do arrests for the occupier's security and the things that the occupier wants to arrest, and comparing to crimes within inside our society which we control. It means not stop protest against the occupier and groups that are against the occupation. We are going to be passive towards these occupiers. Now, why it eternalizes, if we don't do it and we cooperate, it just eternalizes the occupation within our territories. There are three mechanisms for that. The first one is just if you cooperate with the occupier, it creates dependency of the occupied nations within their occupier. It is true because of a few reasons. First of all, it means that the occupier government gives many of their power to the occupier, to the country that controls them. It is because they many times give them money in the salaries for their policemen and things like that. Because people inside these territories don't get respect to the local policemen, because they know that when really bad things happen, the occupiers, the Israeli policemen come in charge, and therefore just ignore them until the occupier comes. It's because the occupier tells them not to use weapons, the amount of weapons, because it's a part of their cooperation. This is exactly where they lose the power. Secondly, I think it's because there are a lot of resources that are dependent, they make more and more dependent on the occupier. Things like water system, like electricity. As long as you cooperate with them, the more you buy these resources from the general country, and therefore you lose your own way to actually have these resources. Thirdly, systems, it's government systems like courts, like police, and things like that. I think, but this is so bad and prevents from getting peace. First of all, it hurts severely the ability to have peace and let go and get apart. When you don't have this power, when you don't control your resources and your government offices, this is exactly when you don't have the ability to one day rise up and start having your own country. This is moreover, the international community believe less and less that you have the ability to be dependent. But even if you have this ability, I think that it makes the people believe less that you are able to do so, and they just, their spirit lives. The second mechanism why it's so nice is just because it creates the vision of fake stability. I think that the problems that makes this instability still exist. It's things like discrimination against this nation population. It's things like lack of resources. It's things like harming, violating their human rights by the occupier, and things like nationalism that still exists within this nation. We think that when you try to cooperate and they prevent most of the protests and small things against the occupier, this is exactly where the rage is aggregating within this population, and from time to time it explodes. This is exactly where the way to actually fight the occupier is by terror attacks and by violent things much harder. When they do it, they lose any legitimacy from the international world to actually get peace and to actually get this cooperation in order to deal with their own problem. The third mechanism is that they lose their leaders lose their political power to actually have the legitimacy within their own people to have peace. We think when Arafat, which was the prime minister of the Palestinian government, came to Israel and really wanted to have peace, he said, "I'm sorry, I want this deal, but I can't do it because my nation is not going to accept it." This is what you want to prevent other nations from happening. We think that leaders need the support of the nation when they try to do these things in order for them to accept this agreement, not to be violent and to have a coup against their leaders. It's because they want to gain their support and to be the leaders that save their nations and not the ones that destroy it. We think that not likely to have, they are not likely to have the power when they cooperate with the occupier for a long time. Because first, we think that the leaders inside their communities are going to talk against the main leaders and say that they are traitors, that they cooperate with the ones who depress us and is violent towards us, and you should not believe in them. This is exactly where they see the policemen and the authorities, they are a part of the occupier, and they help the occupier, and they don't trust them and don't believe in the policemen that are actually trying to help them in doing life. This is exactly where they see these policemen arrest their own people for the occupier. We think that when you don't have this political power to your nation because they don't believe in you and they think you're a traitor, it is unlikely you will ever be able to have peace and do these agreements that they will accept. Before I explain to you why it's terrifically bad, I take CG. CO.
Occupying countries generally targets very strategic resources and like control of our infrastructure and so on and so forth. Why is it likely on the comparative that these leaders will be able, if they do not cooperate, to have access to these resources?
So we think that if they once were occupied, they have some amount of ability to do it in the first place. I think that they should keep these resources, even though if they are worse than the occupier, in order to have this independent. We think that they can create through time more and more of their own resources and their own offices and build it instead of being dependent on the occupier. Now, why it's extremely bad? First, I think there are a lot of impacts that happens on the way, even if in the end there will be a peace agreement. It's things like doing this long time. It's things like violating human rights by the occupiers. It's when they don't give them voting rights. It's where they take private properties and build houses on their private properties, like happened in Palestinian territories. It's things like, given the occupation, they try to gain more natural resources and take it to the benefit of the occupier and not of the people that live there. It's give them really low salaries and destroy their economy. But we think that moreover, we think that it's the likelihood for peace to actually solve these problems and to end this occupation is much less likely, and therefore we get this all of that impact in the long term. For all of these reasons, I'm very happy to propose.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for that speech and invite the